Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update here on social media. Thank you as always for joining us this week. A sad week for our constitutional republic as the Biden regime arrests Donald Trump. Of course, I'll be talking about that. We have two new lawsuits, or at least one new lawsuit about Biden administration election interference through our military, believe it or not. On top of that, we have new details about the outrageous raid on President Trump's home that you'll want to learn about. Plus, what is it the Biden administration is trying to distract from by trying to jail Trump? It looks like there are a bunch of secret tapes out there that, if pursued properly, if found to be true, could put President Biden and members of his family in jail. But first up, obviously, is the terrible news that President Trump had to go through this week, which is the arraignment before a federal magistrate judge in Miami, Florida, as the result of the unprecedented abusive indictment of him by the Biden regime. It's an indictment about nothing. It targets him under a new application of the law, the Espionage Act, by suggesting he improperly had or was national defense information, which is obviously absurd given the nature of his job as commander-in-chief when he had those records and took them with him, it looks like, in a personal capacity. And then it lodges fraudulent, in my view, concerns about obstruction of justice that I don't think ever took place. Even looking at the indictment's description of what happened, it doesn't seem obstruction took place. So it's, unfortunately, even though I think it's much ado about nothing, it's a big deal in the sense that it's a federal indictment that could land the president in jail for the rest of his life if he's convicted by a jury and it's upheld. And we had this major media interest in this, I think, infamously historic incident of the president having to be arrested by the Biden administration on these trumped-up charges. And Judicial Watch, as you know, has been front and center in trying to expose and highlight the Justice Department's disparate treatment of President Trump versus others, their change in the application of the law, namely the Clinton sock drawer case. So on behalf of Judicial Watch, I went down to Miami, and thankfully I was able to spend some time with President Trump. I had dinner with him the night before the arraignment. It was a nice dinner. There were some other people there, of course. But I can tell you the president is in good humor, or as good of humor as one could be in, given the circumstances. But you know, he's not happy about being indicted, but he's prepared to fight. And he's taking it seriously, but it's clear he's just going to keep on keeping on. To his credit, I guess there's nothing else he can do but try to keep on keeping on. But he's certainly not going to give up, and nor should he, because I think he's an innocent man who's been subjected to horrific abuse by the Biden administration. And it's a sad day for our constitutional republic when one president essentially arrests a former president and his number one candidate, opposition candidate for re-election. And I can't see how other countries could draw any conclusion other than America has been destabilized by this act of lawlessness, abuse of power by the Biden regime. As I said before, you can be sure our friends and foes alike recognize this for what it is. It's not this violation of law, as the left and the anti-Trump media would like us to believe. It's a political move. They see one leader arresting another, and that's that's something as old as time in terms of political corruption. And unfortunately, it's something relatively new to the United States, certainly at the presidential level. I've never seen anything like it before. The country hasn't seen anything like it before. Obviously, no president has ever been indicted like this and then arrested. Now he's been released on bond, of course, but the mere arresting of him, and now he is facing the prospect of a trial, assuming the courts don't throw this out as they should. It's going to hamper his campaign, which of course is the purpose. It's brazen and naked election interference. Because if you're facing federal trial, everything now you say publicly can and will be used against you in a court of law, right? But he can't remain silent because he's running for office. So what an abuse of power. And I tell you, if President Biden had any ethics, he'd say, I'm not going to pardon him. He doesn't need to be pardoned. I'm going to shut this down. I'm not going to be part of this abuse. But by not doing that, he is part of the abuse, and he's ratifying it. He's ultimately responsible for the decision to prosecute Trump, and so he should be ultimately held accountable for it. Same with Attorney General Garland, who was appointed to lead the Justice Department and confirmed by the Senate. You know, Jack Smith is a hired gun. You know, why was he hired? He was hired to go after Trump by Garland and the political appointees around him, working in concert, obviously, with the Biden White House, who, I will remind you, during this whole process, investigatory process that was harassing Trump, the Biden White House intervened at key times to keep it moving forward, because it wouldn't have been able to move forward without permission at key junctions by the Biden White House. So that's where things stand. You know, the president is still doing well politically. I guess that's, you know, not exactly, you know, the best side of the equation if you're facing jail time. You know, what good are poll numbers if you're going to go to jail? So I don't want to overstate the likelihood of his going to jail, but you know, you just can't presume it ain't going to happen. There's a significant chance that if it does go to trial, he is found guilty. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's why you never want to be on the wrong end of a federal indictment. However outrageous the basis for the indictment is, however political it is, it's this machine that goes forward, and federal defendants usually get run over. And I hope that's not the case for President Trump, but you can presume, and you should be prepared for the worst in that regard. And you know, it's one thing to have Alvin Bragg do it, but now we have Merrick Garland acting just like Alvin Bragg. No better. The indictment's no more sophisticated. It's as outrageous, a novel application of the law. And you know, we've talked about this Clinton sock drawer case that Judicial Watch had pursued almost well over a decade ago. I think we filed it first in, when did we file it? We filed it in 2010, and then the big decision on it came in 2012. So it was like, you know, it was 2 years of litigation. And the Justice Department, forget about the decision, which essentially said that it's difficult to challenge a president in terms of his decision-making versus as to what he wants to keep as personal records versus presidential records. You know, that decision is important, is well worth reviewing, and I've talked about it before here. But secondly, and arguably more importantly, it was the Justice Department's position. It was the National Archives' position, and they changed their position as to the deference and prerogatives of a president, specifically for Donald Trump, which further highlights the corruption behind the targeting and the indictment. And of course, then there's the equal application of the law. You know, we all have a right to full protection of the law under the Constitution, and you know, we can't be denied equal protection of the laws. And it looks like that's what's happening to President Trump. You've had similar corrupt, well, frankly, Trump didn't do anything wrong, but you've had significant evidence of criminal activity by Hillary Clinton with respect to records that Judicial Watch uncovered. I mean, so we know full well what Hillary did. She took documents she had no right to under any law, FOIA or the federal records law, for instance, or laws against the mishandling or taking of classified information. She deleted material after it was subpoenaed, her people did. and including classified records. And she lied about what was on that deleted material because Judicial Watch uncovered there was classified records on that deleted material. She was, the documents showed she was involved in also turning the State Department into a play-to-play organization for her political operation at the Clinton Foundation. You know, something else that she lied about as to what she was doing. And of course, you know, Bill was taking all this big money in speaking fees from foreign governments while his wife was Secretary of State. So you had all this evidence of criminality, specifically though with respect to records. Nothing's been done. Now, Joe Biden has been implicated in literally one-for-one similar activity. Having records he had no right to under the Justice Department's theory of the law from his days as vice president, scattered across the East Coast. From here in Washington, D.C., all the way up to Delaware. Remember the documents in his garage up in Delaware? And includes documents from his days as a senator. So there's no doubt, at least classified records from his days as a senator, no doubt he had no right to those records. And yet he is no raids, no significant grand jury activity. The so-called special counsel that's looking at that is nowhere to be found. So this disparate treatment is rather obvious. And of course, then there's this prosecutorial abuse. We've had allegations that the co-defendant of President Trump, his body man as it's called, is a good man, Walter, his lawyer was essentially, this is what happened, or the allegation is, they're in a discussion with the top DOJ official about these issues. And his lawyer evidently had signed up to be appointed to a superior court judgeship here in the District of Columbia, which is, and local judges for one of, they're kind of the equivalent of state judges here in the District of Columbia, are appointed by the president. And there's a process from which that's done. And he had put his name in the hat. And the Justice Department attorney suggested he'd have a better chance of getting appointed if they cooperated with him. I mean, it's wildly abusive and frankly illegal if that took place. Outrageous prosecutorial abuse. And as I've said, I saw it firsthand with my grand jury appearance where the Justice Department prosecutor tried to get me to swear under oath I wouldn't talk about what happened in the grand jury, even though I had every right to do so. And he tried to fool me into swearing under oath. And thankfully, I kind of pushed back a little bit and refused to do so. So more prosecutorial abuse. And of course, there was no good faith basis from the get-go to go after these records based on the Presidential Records Act, because, as I said, the prior position of the Justice Department, the prior position of the archives, the kind of key case on this here in the District of Columbia, other cases, and the Constitution gave great deference to a president's decision to keep records personal versus presidential. And the presumption was if he had them after he left office, there was no second guessing. Same goes for, in my view, the issue of national defense information. As Commander-in-Chief, of course he can authorize himself to keep defense information under the law. Indeed, the indictment talks about him putting records, whether they be classified or personal, whatever. He put these records into the boxes that had his personal effects. So they describe him making these records personal, whether they be covered by the national defense information under the Espionage Act or the Presidential Records Act. Either way, no matter how you slice it, Trump did nothing wrong. Trump did nothing wrong. Now, this Clinton sock drawer case is making the left very nervous. And it's the Justice Department obviously avoided talking about it at all in its indictment, but they've been doing their best to try to downplay it. And I encourage you, if you haven't already, to review my colleague Michael Bekesha, who's a senior attorney here at Judicial Watch, who litigated and, as we laughingly often mention, we lost. We lost the Clinton sock drawer case, even though we took the current position of the Justice Department in seeking oversight over what the Presidential Records Act allowed a president to do, meaning that the Presidential Records Act should have required these sock drawer tapes that, at least according to at least one report, talked about, sending cruise missiles against Al-Qaeda or bin Laden at one point. I mean, quintessential national defense information, quintessential classified information. And remember, they told us there was nothing they could do to get those records because Clinton had them and he had designated them personal simply by the act of taking them away from the White House. So Michael's piece is in the Wall Street Journal describing that, and at the end he says, by the way, if Trump, even if they proceed with this case, theory of the law on Trump, we want those Clinton tapes, right? But this is a case that can potentially exonerate the president. It's certainly his best defense. So they're trying to undermine it. And yours truly and Judicial Watch were the subject of a lot of news this week. And it was kind of a retread of a CNN story from last year where so-called advisors around Trump were saying that, well, the reason Trump didn't, quote, cooperate, even though he actually did cooperate, I'll get into that, the reason he did it was because he kept on citing Tom Fitton and this Clinton stock drawer case. So it's all my fault, right? It's all my fault he was indicted. As opposed to Trump complained about Justice Department abuse, which is what happened, and it looks like he then was abused by the Justice Department for complaining about Justice Department abuse, namely indicted. So I don't know what these people are thinking about Trump. The fact is he turned over records. Arguably, he didn't have to under the Presidential Records Act in February or January of 2022. They saw some records that they deemed to be classified, even though under the law I would suggest they weren't classified. And they went back and forth as to, what rights President Trump had in that regard. They finally issued and harassed him with a subpoena, to which he responded with a set of classified records. So this idea that he didn't cooperate is bunk. Now, of course, they allege there was obstruction of that search, and I've read the indictment. Of course, the indictment was essentially leaked in bits and parts prior to its issuance last week, or its unsealing. But there was no obstruction. He fully cooperated. So when folks say, oh, Trump listened to Judicial Watch or Tom Fitton and that's why he got indicted, well, that's ridiculous because he cooperated. He cooperated and turned over records subject to the subpoena. So this is the line. Trump rejected, this is the big Washington Post story. I don't think you can read it, can you? Trump rejected lawyers' efforts to avoid classified documents indictment. It was a totally unforced error, said one person close to Trump, who has been part of dozens of discussions about the documents. We didn't have to be here. Oh, I don't know who that source is. Doesn't sound credible to me. Trump, time and time again, rejected the advice from lawyers and advisors who urged him to cooperate and instead took the advice of Tom Fitton, the head of Judicial Watch, the conservative group Judicial Watch, and a range of others, so it wasn't allegedly just me, who told him he could legally keep the documents and should fight the Justice Department, advisors said. Trump would often cite Fitton to others, and Fitton told some of Trump's lawyers that Trump could keep the documents even as they disagreed, the advisors said. So who are these advisors? I mean, it sounds to me like a lot of third and second-hand news, and I know to be unnecessary, unreliable. In an interview, Fitton said he dined with Trump on Monday night at his club, eating filet mignon, how dare I, with the former president one day before his first court appearance on the document changes. I did eat filet. It was delicious. The president was a gracious dinner host. I saw him last night. This is my quote. He's in a good mood. He's serious and ready to fight under the law. Fitton, who appeared before the grand jury and was questioned about his role in both the Mar-a-Lago documents case and the investigation into the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, acknowledged he gave the advice to Trump, but declined to discuss the details of his conversations. I don't think I acknowledged that, but, that's the Washington Post. What can I do? He added that he read the indictment and did not believe it laid out illegal or obstructive conduct, Multiple witnesses said they were asked about Fitton in front of a grand jury and the role he played in Trump's decisions. Now, I'm only a witness, right? They're still so upset about this Sacro defense. They were trying to shoot it down by asking questions about what was happening with it and mentioning me. I think what is lacking is the lawyers saying, this is what I say, I took this to be obstruction, meaning, Trump's alleged to have made comments, I read them to be joking comments or complaints that are perfectly legitimate to his lawyers about complying with the subpoena. But there's no information that the lawyers considered it to be or took actions that were obstruction as a result. Where's the conspiracy? I don't understand any of it. I think this is a trap. It is a trap. It was a trap. They had no business asking for the records. I guess technically they could have asked for the records. They had no business demanding the records. And they've manufactured an obstruction charge out of that. There are core constitutional issues that the indictment avoids, and the obstruction charge seems weak to me. So this is the story that's launched 1,000 billion attacks on me and Judicial Watch. And if you go online and social media and search for Judicial Watch in my name, you'll see all sorts of attacks for me. Very odd attacks. Oh, Tom's not a lawyer. Tom only has a BA in English. Of course, they love attacking my physical appearance because I guess my physical appearance tends to trigger and intimidate the left. But no one addresses the facts of the issue. Was President Trump right to be concerned that his rights were being violated as President of the United States under the Presidential Records Act, which reflects, that law reflects the president's prerogatives. He's the head of the executive branch. His White House records, he decides which are permanent government records, essentially presidential records, and what are his personal records. And there's no one, who would decide if he doesn't decide? I mean, we have a separation of powers in our constitutional system. So that's something that they don't want to grapple with. So they start talking about Tom Fitton and where I went to school and what I look like. And they start attacking Judicial Watch. Even though Judicial Watch, let's be clear here, because any advice I gave to the president, you can be sure I told the grand jury about. And let me be clear, I told the grand jury and I told the prosecutors who were harassing me before that grand jury all about themselves in terms of the abuse they were pouring on Trump. And I pointed out this Clinton sock drawer case. And I think there's good reason they didn't mention it, because I think they're fearful of it coming up before the courts because they might lose on it. And Judicial Watch has 30 years' experience investigating and litigating federal records issues and presidential records issues. So if there is anyone you want to consult about presidential records and federal records, there is no one better than Judicial Watch. And so they can whine and complain about anything I said to President Trump, but I do know he's right on the law, or at least I think he is, based on our experience, which is significant, versus everyone else who is reading the Presidential Records Act for the first time this week and trying to understand federal law as it relates to records, something that Judicial Watch and our team, legal team here, has been litigating since before many of those commenting were born. I mean, I've been at Judicial Watch for 25 years. Dare I say it, I know a little bit about the way records laws operate here in the United States. My colleagues who are attorneys here have litigated, I would say, 1,000+ cases in the area of records law. I mean, we were litigating presidential records fights back during the Clinton administration 25, 30 years ago. So I don't need any lectures from anyone about what it is that can be said to a former president. And I tell you what, President Biden, if you have questions on the records laws, feel free to contact Judicial Watch, and we'll try to educate you and your colleagues about what you're able to do under the law. But of course, they're not interested. They're trying to distract from that corruption or what they did do under the law, which is to take records they arguably didn't have a right to from his Senate days, by trying to jail Trump. So if you're already supporting Judicial Watch, I encourage you to support our work. We need to stand together and stand fast. Our republic is under assault. They're trying to jail a president. They arrested him. They arrested our former president for no reason, okay? No reason. So don't get distracted by the disputes about records. Don't get distracted about where the boxes are in the house versus the office versus the storage room and where the lawyer should have or could have looked. It's all noise. It's about a political arrest of an opponent of the Biden administration. And the Biden administration this week officially turned from an administration, in my view, to a regime. And the regime is now targeting its political enemies in ways never seen before in American history. So support Judicial Watch, pray for America, and I tell you what, let your members of Congress know they need to take whatever action they can under the law to stop this abuse. And obviously, you're supporting Judicial Watch is a great way for you to take action because they're so nervous about what we're saying that they're hauling me in front of a grand jury and harassing Judicial Watch as well. So we're over target, aren't we? So one of the ways to understand what's happening is what isn't happening as a result of this targeting of Trump. So when you have the Justice Department investigating an entire political party in the disputes about the election, doing this massive January 6th jihad against those who were present at the January 6th disturbance on January 6th, and when you have this attack on the president, this arresting of President Trump, that means the Justice Department, in terms of a public corruption investigation of Joe Biden, can be sure is doing nothing. And time again, I mean, we can just see, you've had this investigation of Hunter Biden going on for 5+ years at least with no resolution. And with President Trump, from raid to indictment, when was the raid? August? And the indictment now is in June. So that's 5 and 6, so it's less than a year. They arrested him. And Hunter, they're still agonizing over what to do. And it's all a cover-up. And so that's what's happening here. The Justice Department is being targeted on Trump, and in many ways, it not only purposefully, but practically it means that Biden gets away and his family gets away with corruption as a result. And I mean, we've gotten new information over the last few weeks that Biden coerced a bribe from Burisma. We got new information over the last few weeks showing banking records, detailing banking records that show money flowing in from China to the Biden family in a way that was obviously money laundering. And what happens? Trump gets arrested. And I don't think that's any coincidence. And now there are tapes. Now there are tapes that the FBI has been hiding. Now we talked about this FBI form that described the Burisma bribes totaling anywhere from $5 to $10 million, right? 5 for Joe and 5 for Hunter. And in this form, evidently, they deleted material that when they showed it to the House that described tapes of recordations made between the person making the bribe and Joe and Hunter Biden. Now Grassley, the senator from Iowa, Chuck Grassley, he saw the full document, but the House was not shown the full document. And Grassley just blew the whistle this week. And I want to read to you the statement he made about this. It's well worth talking about because you're not going to hear about it in most other media. Last week, I came to the Senate floor to give a speech about the Biden Justice Department and the FBI playing games with the American people by hiding the FBI-generated 1023 document from Congress. Director Wray was going to be held in contempt for refusing to produce the 1023 that I told Chairman Comer about. Then, instead of contempt, the FBI committed to showing the 1023 and related documents to Congress. So the FBI showed but did not provide possession of that 1023 to the House Oversight Committee last week. As the public knows, that 1023 involves an alleged bribery scheme between then Vice President Biden, Hunter Biden, and a foreign national. The same allegations that Chairman Comer and I made public on May 3rd of this year. And on the same day that the FBI provided a redacted version of the 1023 to the House Oversight Committee, the Justice Department announced that former President Trump had been indicted and charged with 37 crimes relating to the alleged mishandling of classified records. Attorney General Garland signed off on prosecuting Trump for conduct similar to what Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton engaged in. Two standards of justice in this country will turn our constitutional republic upside down. Thanks to the political infection within the Biden Justice Department and FBI, we're well along the road for that to happen. This senator will do all that he can to fight that political infection, and you fight it by bringing transparency to what the government does. The public's business ought to be public. Imagine that. Transparency brings accountability. Now, Judicial Watch did not pay Grassley to put out that Judicial Watch approach, but you can see why we often respect Chuck Grassley's work in this area. He knows how important transparency is to government accountability and combating corruption. With respect to the 1023 shown to that House committee, from what I've been told by folks who reviewed it, it's filled with redactions. So Director Wray placed redactions on a document that's already unclassified. More than that, the FBI made Congress review a redacted, unclassified document in a classified facility. That goes to show you the disrespect the FBI has for Congress. On a previous time on the Senate floor, I asked my fellow senators what's so unusual about an unclassified document being given to the public. When on May 18th of this year, there was leaked in the New York Times a classified document and even the name of a confidential human source. So we're kind of in a strange situation here. A classified document can be leaked in the New York Times, but an unclassified document can't be made public to 300 million Americans. Accordingly, Congress still lacks a full and complete picture with respect to what the document really says. That's why it's important that the document be made public without unnecessary redactions for the American people to see. Let me assist for purposes of transparency. The senator goes on. The 1023 produced to that House committee redacted referenced that the foreign nationals who allegedly bribed Joe and Hunter Biden allegedly had audio recordings of his conversations with them. 17 total recordings. According to the 1023, the foreign national possesses 15 audio recordings of phone calls between him and Hunter Biden. According to the 1023, this is the FBI form again, the foreign national possesses two audio recordings of phone calls between him and then Vice President Biden. These recordings were allegedly kept as sort of an insurance policy for the foreign national in case he got into a tight spot. The 1023 also indicates that the then Vice President Biden may have been involved in Burisma employing Hunter Biden. So I've repeatedly asked you think reading is easy. It's sometimes difficult. So as I've repeatedly asked since going public with the assistance of the 1023, what, if anything, has the Justice Department and the FBI done to investigate? The Justice Department and the FBI must show their work. They no longer deserve the benefit of the doubt. It's clear that the Justice Department and the FBI will use every resource to investigate candidate Trump, President Trump, and former President Trump. Based on the facts known to Congress and the public, it's clear that the Justice Department and the FBI will use every resource to investigate hold on. Yeah, to investigate candidate Trump, President Trump, and former President Trump. I guess they repeated this in the sentence here. Based on the facts known to Congress and the public, it's clear the Justice Department and the FBI haven't nearly had the same laser focus on the Biden family. Special Counsel Jack Smith has used a recording against former President Trump. Well, what's U.S. Attorney Weiss doing with respect to these alleged Joe and Hunter Biden recordings that are relevant to a high-stakes bribery scheme? And U.S. Attorney Weiss is the Delaware U.S. Attorney appointed by Trump that the Garland Justice Department is pretending is investigating the Biden corruption. Getting a full and complete 1023 is critical to the American people to know and understand the true nature of the document and to hold the Justice Department and the FBI accountable. It's also important for asserting constitutional congressional oversight powers against an out-of-control executive branch drunk with political infection. I like that. Political infection. Remember, Congress has received 1023s in the past, and they've been made public. So asking for this 1023 to be turned over to the American people to read is not unusual. Congress owes it to the American people and the brave and historic whistleblowers who, frankly, told them about this, to continue to fight for transparency on this matter and make this document public without unnecessary redactions. I want everyone to remember that I have read the unredacted version, so he knows what's in it. So good for Senator Grassley for highlighting this issue. You can be sure that Judicial Watch will sue for the document as soon as we're able to under the law. There's a process we have to go through before we're able to sue with the federal government, so we're looking at that now as we speak. But that shows you what's at issue here. They've got a document, an FBI document they've been sitting on since at least July of 2020, showing that Joe Biden's involved potentially in a bribery scheme involving a bank that involves coercion, and there are tapes showing something happened. And the FBI obviously has done nothing with it. Wait, they have done something with it. They've tried to cover it up and bury it to make sure that it didn't get out before the campaign, so election interference, and subsequently they were trying to bury it so it wasn't going to ruin President Biden's re-election effort. And in doing so, they misled Congress, obstructed Congress, and for the life of me, I don't know why Chairman Comer hasn't proceeded with contempt against Wray. I've heard a few things that they didn't have the votes to do it, or maybe they were getting some other good stuff and they didn't need to do the contempt. But I don't know, it just looked to me like a big stand down. What do I know? You know, I just try to call it as I see it from where I sit here at Judicial Watch. We've been doing this for a long time, so color me skeptical when Congress says they're going to find someone in contempt. They still don't get the document. They're shown a document, not given a document with redactions, and then all of a sudden there's no contempt. I mean, forgive me for being skeptical. But that's why Trump's indicted. I just read you why Trump's indicted, in part, because Hillary's corrupt, Obama's corrupt, and Biden's corrupt. And what better way to distract from that fundamental corruption they were involved in, spying on a sitting president in a seditious coup-like manner, trying to undermine President Trump and jail him, and then continuing to pursue him now with this outrageous arrest. It's because they're all corrupt, and to kind of have the Justice Department settle down and behave normally means they would be targeted and prosecuted. These are dark times for our republic, fellow patriots. And this is why we should be supporting, I criticize Comer a little bit, but he's been doing great work, comparatively speaking. George's been doing great work. Grassley's been doing great work. They need more support from Congress, so you should call Congress to give them more support and more cover to do more of this work. Demand stronger responses from Congress. I mean, look, they arrested Trump. Did you note any big outrage from Congress? Kevin McCarthy did some, he was out there taking a strong stance. I didn't see much in the way of help. Certainly not for Mitch McConnell. Not too many senators were out there. I mean, you need to show the leadership, dear listener, dear viewer, for your members of Congress and your senators and your friends and family. If you're concerned about this, you need to take leadership in any way you can. I don't mean you found a group and start doing this. Oh, no, maybe you can do that. Your local county committee against government corruption, that's what the left does. I mean, those are the sorts of things you should be thinking about. What is it you can do under our constitutional system to protect our constitutional system? And do everything you think that you can do. Be creative. Support. I keep on saying support Judicial Watch. That goes without saying. But there are other things you can do at the local, state, and federal level, because we've got this precious right to still petition our government and participate in our system through First Amendment protected speech. And I understand sometimes you're punished for doing so, but you can't let that stop you. You just got to keep on keeping on. And you can be sure that Judicial Watch will continue to stand strong for the rule of law, educate the American people about what's really going on here in Washington. We're not going to be intimidated by stories in the media. We're not going to be intimidated by leftists on social media. We're not going to be intimidated by the Justice Department. We're not going to be intimidated by the FBI. We're not going to be intimidated by the Biden White House. We're not going to be intimidated by left-wing members of Congress who want to abuse their authority to target Judicial Watch. We're not going to be intimidated by big tech social media that wants to censor us, because we know we have your support. It's easy to stand strong when you have millions of people behind you demanding that you do something. And I know you want us to do something, and we're doing everything we can under the law to save our country. And to that end, we've had many lawsuits on this abuse of Trump, not only with the Russiagate abuses, but the more recent abuses under this Mar-a-Lago scheme that the Biden regime concocted in order to jail Trump and arrest him. And so we've had many lawsuits, much obstruction, but we just keep on smashing through the stone walls through the federal FOIA process. And accordingly, we received 477 pages. It may seem like a lot, but it really wasn't, because a lot of it was duplicative. And they're interesting documents that show the National Security Division leadership of the Justice Department discussing the political implications of Trump allowing CNN to use closed-circuit TV footage, CCTV, of the raid on his Mar-a-Lago home. We received the records, and they also confirmed, that the Justice Department had asked that they turn the video off, and thankfully Trump's people didn't. Judicial Watch obtained the documents in response to a September 2022 Freedom of Information Act lawsuit filed after the Justice Department failed to follow the law. See, we can't raid the Justice Department when they break the law. See, that's kind of the one of the outrages here. Not that I want to raid the Justice Department, but you know what I mean. They break the law virtually with impunity in ways that no one else would be able to. After they failed to respond to our request for records about the raid. And this is what we found. In an August 17th, 2022 email exchange with the subject CNN Mar-a-Lago CCTV footage, a trial attorney with the Justice Department's Counterintelligence and Export Control section of the National Security Division, whose name is redacted, so a senior official, but they're just blacking out the name because that's what they can do, writes to colleagues, I just received a call from our case agents at FBI, and apparently the Bureau has been given a heads up by CNN that CNN has CCTV closed-circuit television footage from Mar-a-Lago, presumably of agents executing the search that they may air as soon as tonight. And then something's redacted. And redacted means they black it out. And when they redact documents, it means they're saying to Judicial Watch, and ultimately they have to say to the court when it proceeds, that this is information that we have a right to withhold under law pursuant to certain exemptions, such as privacy, law enforcement, national security and exemptions such as that. Jay Bratt, B-R-A-T-T, who's the Obama appointee at the Justice Department largely responsible for this abuse of Trump. He's chief of the Counterintelligence and Export Control Section. Comments, CNN is saying F. POTUS, the former president, so former president of the United States, is still weighing whether to release the footage. Another advisor adds, got a call from Evan, which is likely then Trump attorney Evan Cochran, and Jay says Trump team is still weighing the release. Per Evan, some say it will energize base, others say not a good look for F. POTUS to have it out there. CNN is working on a story that Jay requested Trump team to turn off the cameras, and they refused. So Jay Pratt was the brat who asked the Trump people to turn off the videos. Justice Department official George Toscas, who, by the way, was heavily involved in the effort to destroy Trump under the Russia hoax, he's also involved in this outrageous abuse under the documents hoax. We're watching to hear back from FBI headquarters on their recommended approach. Bratt writes, we did. This was in the call, and I had with Evan Cochran before the search. It's standard for blank. So a lot of this is redacted. And then they say, we also plan to communicate to CNN that law enforcement safety need to blur agent faces if footage ends up being released. Well, I don't think that's necessarily right. I hope CNN, if it ever comes out, they don't blur faces. I don't see why FBI agents who work for the government should be immune from having their faces shown when they raid someone's home. I mean, isn't it interesting? You know, imagine if a local police department was involved in a raid on a home and people were worried about the civil rights being violated. Do you think we wouldn't know who did the raid? We wouldn't know the names of the police officers? Of course we would. But the FBI raids the home of President Trump. We can't find out who the names are. They want to black out or blur out their faces. And on top of that, as I said before, we're seeking the names of those who are prosecuting Trump. Literally, for the first time in American history, prosecuting a former president. This Justice Department, Jack Smith, who has a record of being trying to jail opponents of the Democratic Party. Remember his involvement with Lois Lerner and the IRS, trying to jail the groups that Lois Lerner was, the heads of the groups that Lois Lerner was abusing, with delayed responses to their requests to have their groups approved by the IRS and abusive questioning and such. They're telling us we can't get the names of the people working for Smith. Now, a few of those names will pop up as a result of these proceedings, but I want to know who else is working for him. Matt Gaetz, by the way, of Congress, has followed up and is demanding information as well because he wants to do something about curtailing funding for the entities, it looks like, that are abusing Trump. So all of this secrecy, I mean, the same Justice Department that harasses the police all the time refuses to tell us who's involved in harassing Trump and other Americans. Well, we're in court over it. And we're not going to be intimidated to stand aside. And of course, President Trump isn't the only one harassed by the Biden regime. So last year, it turned out that the Air Force had released personnel files, which are highly sensitive and confidential and shouldn't be going out to anyone, practically speaking, to a Democratic opposition research firm. And the personnel files were of Republicans who were running for office in Congress. Now, evidently, there was an internal investigation, and the Air Force admits they made a mistake and, you know, sorry, but that's not good enough for us. And so Judicial Watch just filed a lawsuit. And we filed a lawsuit in partnership. I guess we're not representing her, but we're very interested in what happened to her because she was one of the targets of this abuse. We sued the Air Force over this improper release of personnel records, specifically those records of Anna Paulina Luna. And we filed the lawsuit against the Defense Department over this issue, and we had a very specific request. It's very easy to follow. We're asking about the release of documents about one person. Now, she's a new member of Congress, and she was a candidate at the time this material was released, it looks like. All personnel records, for instance, of her, including unmodified original digital documents, released to any individual or entity from January 1st, 2019 to March 7th, 2023. So we have a series of requests. I'm not going to read you every jot and tittle of what we were asking for, but we want to know what was released on the Congresswoman and who they released it to and what their communications about that issue was or were with press entities such as the Washington Post and Politico, etc. According to the suit, and this isn't just in the suit, it's reality, so it's not an allegation, it actually happened. Sometimes it's just an awkward phrasing here. The U.S. House Committee on Armed Services and the U.S. House Committee on Oversight disclosed that the Air Force had improperly revealed the unredacted records of at least 11 Republican congressional delegates, or candidates, who are Air Force veterans to the research firm Due Diligence Group. The Due Diligence Group is a vendor for the Democratic Party campaign committees, According to the Washington Examiner, this is a quote, "The Democratic senatorial campaign, which seeks to elect Democrats to the Senate, gave the Due Diligence Group $173,000 during the 2022 election cycle, as well as another 3 payments for more than $30,000 after the election, according to the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, where these campaign committees report their expenditures. Additionally, the political research firm received more than $110,000 from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee between January 2021 and December 2022, filings show. The U.S. Air Force leaked information of the U.S. Air Force candidates in the 2022 midterms to a Democrat Oppo research firm, Luna tweeted on February 27, 2023. "Yes, I also have reason to believe my records were leaked. This is likely going to be a criminal investigation." Luna joined the Air Force at the age of 19 and spent 6 years in the military, including 5 in active duty. So in response and in thanks for her service to the country, some individuals at the Air Force violated her privacy and her rights and released her forms to a left-wing Democrat opposition research firm to try to destroy her. The Biden Air Force improperly disclosed confidential personnel files on candidates opposing Democrats, such as I said, Representative Anna Paulina Luna. Judicial Watch filed this lawsuit because this abuse may be a crime, and now the Biden administration is trying to cover up the scandal. So you can see it's not just Donald Trump who's being abused by the Biden regime. You can see people who dare to run against Biden-supported candidates or Democratic Party candidates, they get targeted as well. And it's Judicial Watch, again, who rides to the rescue to expose this. And there's little areas of government corruption that people get information on that doesn't result from, that isn't pursued by Judicial Watch, either with FOIA lawsuits or just straightforward FOIA requests that sometimes get the information without our having to sue. I mean, for instance, on the Trump raid, I talked about the video of the Trump raid. We have 1, 2, 3, I don't know, at least like 4 or 5 lawsuits just on the Trump raid. So we're not going to slow down. So the Biden administration is going to abuse Trump. It's going to abuse candidates trying to run for office. It's going to abuse American citizens trying to exercise their rights under the law to dispute an election or protest an election. Judicial Watch is going to be there. We're going to be there for you, not because we think, Republicans need to be protected or conservatives per se need to be protected. No, we just think the rule of law needs to be upheld. And it's obvious it's not being applied fairly and it's being misapplied based on politics. And if that's allowed to be the way the Justice Department and the FBI operate all the time, then that's how we lose our republic. So with that, I encourage you to support Judicial Watch. You can go to our website at judicialwatch.org, make a donation, get these documents, share them with others. And on top of that, I want you to pray for America. Because there's an ill wind blowing across this land. And we need divine help in order to fight it and be protected from it. And with that, I wish you the best. God bless you, and God bless America. And I'll see you here next week on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.